Right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sergiy Polyachenko, and I'm grateful for the pleasure to present you our joint work with Maksym Bryukhanov and John Nye. The work is called Does Higher Education Contribute to the Change in Attitudes toward Government Price Control in Russia? So basically this is sort of work in progress which approaches its end. So the general context of this research in the best way was described by Bernd Hayo in 2004, who said that attitudes toward markets, toward market reform, are not sufficient for their success, but their role is crucial. So the war, there is actually much of evidence indicating that indicating the correlation between education and pro-market and general liberal attitudes of individuals in the literature, and those papers were published in The Rise of Transition, and some were more recent, and all of them in this or that wave explore the link between education and pro-market attitudes. But all of these people were either describing or either modeling mechanism of the effect or quantifying correlations. However, it is not clear whether the effect of education exists in reality. And that is because of, first of all, predetermined and fixed in time individual characteristics that are correlated to both education and liberal values. Thus, at least we have to account for omitted variable bias caused by those fixed in time characteristics. So let us clarify. In order to answer the question whether or not educational effect exists, according to our Holy Bible, which is called a Woolridge textbook on econometrics, we have to take care of omitted variable bias, measurement error, and the reverse causality. And in this particular paper, we contributing with solving the problem of omitted variable bias caused by fixed effects. Okay. So, in fact, this work is sort of further development of our initial work, which I have done with John Nye, and it is published as a working paper in 2013. And in this particular work, we quantify the effect of educational attainment on attitudes toward government price control in Russia, accounting for fixed effects such as selection to higher education institutions, nurturing environment, intrinsic cognitive abilities. And there are two papers which are very close to the work we are doing. This is the paper of Lancy and Saracen, working with attitudes toward immigrants, and work of Gibson, who deal with interrelationship of political and economic attitudes, and the work was published in 1996. So in the short, this is what we have done in this paper. So we found negative link between higher education and demand for government price control, and we documented the potential channels of educational effect on attitudes price control through white-collar occupation, which is consistent with psychodynamic model expressed by Lancy and Saracen. So, how did we do the thing? So, we utilized the panel of two waves of RLMS data, which were the two waves which were collected in 2006 and 2013. And those waves contained the data allowing us to measure individual attitudes to several aspects of government price control. So based on that information, we constructed the index of attitudes to government price control and use the index, as a dependent variable. So we use a possession of higher education index, which takes value if individual has a higher education and zero otherwise, as the variable in order to quantify the effect of education. Plus, we control for democratic preference, trust, family income, economic expectations, business experience, attitudes of family members, and regional income characteristics. So, in the empirical model, we use first difference approach, and run OLS regressions, adding predictors sequentially, and this is all basically the outline of the stuff we are doing. So in addition to all the things we use in cross-section of 2006 and explore the possible channels of impact of university level of education, sequentially adding various predictors controlling for a variety of basic household characteristics. And this what we find. So in all specifications, coefficients of education was negative and statistically significant. However, a major change in its value we found after we add change in economic expectations, and this may imply potential omission of factors which are not fixed in time, because expectations of themselves, they are subject to update every time you observe in some kind of condition. Yes, please.
So can you repeat? So the coefficient were negative.
Well, negative and statistically significant. So, less demand for government price control.
So again,
more education means you want less price control.
Less price control. Okay.
Yes.
So more market.
More market.
Yes, more market.
Yes.
More education, more market.
More education, more market.
Yeah, more market. That's yeah.
Yeah.
But do you control for economic cycle? The period you're
It's from 2006 to 2013. So
because the people
Yeah, that's we can't do that. We just look at change in economics expectations or something like that's possible.
So in addition to those things, we run all the regression of some sample of youth individuals, and the coefficient of education is still significant. And on the cross section, we find that major changes in the value of coefficient of education coefficient occurs when we add control for white collar occupation status into of the respondent into equation. So basically, these are the tables, the major tables. Yeah, well, okay.
You know what I'm going to say about this, right?
Yeah, but still, so then let me explain in words.
I know.
If, and you know, I can't do anything with this kind of table. So you see this, probably you don't, and I'm just telling you, you have to believe me.
Just skip this video full screen and you can use Zoom because we are interested in some coefficients.
Okay.
For example, here we're interested in economic expectation.
With the control and
yes.
Better? Yes, better.
A little bit more.
One more.
We are really.
One more.
Yes.
No, not too much.
Maybe you have to
It's okay.
This one you can move.
You can, the number of
Yes,
You can change the percentage.
percentage.
From 250 should do it. No, on top. You see at the top?
No, on the top.
No.
On the top, right there, the number. Make it 250. You can enter it.
Maybe it's too much.
No.
So you see, when we add sequentially some predictors, the coefficient of possession of higher education doesn't change too much. But once economic expectations come into the play, you see this huge jump from 0.13 to 0.19. And it remains pretty much the same when we control for other characteristics. Yes, please.
it's okay. You have education on market, like the education, like the independent variable, and pro-market change in prices as the dependent variable. Do you have to disaggregate what type of education do I have and what type of price changes? One story that may be behind. If I'm more a sociology major, I may care about prices in healthcare. So can you tell something about which prices and which education?
Yes, we did this kind of exercise and we observed pretty much similar results, but there are other issues occurring because of this, because it, you know, you're getting too specific what kind of commodities you want to price control, and then
Yes.
you're just losing the generality because you know it becomes Okay, if you we can discuss
I'll
later.
follow up
Yes.
later.
Can you repeat the question of respondents? What was the question of the dependent?
Yes, the dependent variables, there were three commodities of goods. The respondents were asked to answer whether or not they want government price control. It was the control for food prices, control for gas prices, and control for utility prices. So basically these three. And
Do you cluster by this type of, by the question or not?
pardon me?
The results are aggregate for the whole, right?
It's tell us about index.
Yeah. So basically we constructed.
So you construct an index.
Yes.
An index, an average. But we also run regressions for subsamples. Yeah, and the results are pretty the same. So we are reporting here only for results for index, changing index, but changing the components, results are pretty similar.
Maybe it's a silly question. Do you control for age?
We can't control for age because the age is pretty much the same and cancels out for 2006 and 2013 because it's the first difference. We do make an exercise in order to show that age doesn't really matter because we run the same thing on the subsample of youth of those individuals who were 15 to 19 years old in 2006 because of the particular features of Russian educational systems. This age is the most that's when the individuals are the most likely to change their educational status. Because at 15 they can switch to professional school and after go to the university, or they just can switch to the university after high school.
I don't think you can just disregard this first difference because, say, if you were brought up in the communist era, you probably believe in price control no matter what is your education. Whereas if you grow after the Soviet era,
But still, it's pretty.
In our earlier work, we showed, and we're doing this actually cross-country, in both Ukraine and Russia, even if you look just at people educated entirely in Soviet period or entirely post-Soviet period, the slope is positive in both in terms of pro-market.
my point is that
The
saying
level
you should
changes.
throw out the age because you do the first difference is not a valid answer.
Sure.
Yeah, but wait, but
partition it. It doesn't matter whether you look all Soviet or all post-Soviet,
Right.
you have a positive slope. What happens is the intercept changes.
Yeah.
So on average, people in Soviet period are more pro-regulation, but for both, the most educated. So even if you argue that Soviet training should be anti-market,
Right.
then in fact you should observe a negative slope. But in fact, in the sense that, but more educated in both periods are more likely to be pro-market.
and still the fact of that you born in Soviet is still the same in the 2013, and the omission of those things they would cancel out.
We're looking to change now, so that the other paper we're looking at the overall level. This is like changes from 2016.
What you're saying is incorrect. What he's saying is correct.
Yeah.
This difference for older people
Okay.
will be changing differently than for younger people. Might be changing
yeah, that's
differently for younger people. You're saying that if you put a variable of age and you take all first differences, it will be the same first differences for everybody.
Right. But you have to make sure that
That's
change.
not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that take a regression of a difference, only difference and age in 2016. Not on the first difference of age, but on the value of age.
Okay, yes.
Sorry, it might be a stupid question, but do we control for different profiles of education? I mean, it's highly possible that economists know more about benefits of markets than, say, engineers or someone.
We did this kind of exercise. First of all, we have a significant drop of observation, and the second part is that if you just take the economists, it doesn't change too much. So there is no particular.
There is an economics effect, but that's like not very big. But among other disciplines, it's not almost nothing. It's like across. We did some earlier one. We just look at average. We need to look at. I haven't talked to them about what the first differences are. I think most of the first difference stuff is economists, or something is a bigger difference here. In the earlier paper, I remember we had almost no differences across fields except for what was it like the group is becoming government workers or something like that. I forget. We got some
Difference in gender.
Yeah, of course, gender. Gender is always true. So that worldwide, women are more anti-market. That's well. I have a separate paper in GMU where we're looking at the entire European social surveys, and virtually in every country in all of Europe and former Soviet Union, more education is more pro-market. No matter where you are, women are less pro-market across the board. Same in America.
Okay, so it doesn't seem to work. Okay.
John, what is the mechanism that you are, I mean, the framework? Is
Well,
it,
just let's finish.
Okay, so basically this is pretty much the same exercise we did for the subsample of youth, and we observed the same jump in the value of coefficients when we throw in the economic expectations. And this is the cross-section of estimates for individual attitudes to government price control, and you see then when we control for white collar occupations, and there is a compared to increase, the actual decrease in the coefficient value of the variable of possession of higher education. Okay, so this brings me to the conclusion part of our work. So according to accounting for predetermined and stable in time characteristics, we documented negative relationship between higher education and attitudes toward government price control, and controlling for various household characteristics. We inspect the channel of educational impact, and the psychodynamic channel seems to be important because white collar occupations plays the role of insurance against against possible market shocks. In the future, we will think about the potential omitted factors that are not stable in time, and that will require elaboration of additional methods of identification, and we'll think about potential issue of reverse causality. And the very last conclusion is that our findings point up the importance of research of educational policy in the process of formation of pro-market attitudes in Russia and other transition economies. Thank you for your attention.
yeah, I think building on your conclusions and one suggestion. One is, and I'm going to a very extreme to illustrate my story. Is it that educated male are more competitive, therefore I'm pro-market because I can extract more rents there, I mean exercise my option of getting more rents, and uneducated female look more for security, so price control. And one way of, an additional way of testing maybe for another paper is who is passing the laws in the at the Duma. So if I'm passing a law for more price control, are these uneducated female, or are these highly educated representatives, congresspeople that are pro-market? If your story holds, would it hold also at the Duma level?
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
You did explain this carefully. You have to separate out between the overall effects and the marginal effects. Right? And that's what they're looking at, this change. The overall effects are all, don't use negative next time, use it positive, are positive. That is to sort of say, the baseline level is that regardless of whether people are pro or anti-market, the more educated are more pro-market virtually everywhere in the world. Within even Russia and Ukraine, it doesn't matter whether you partition. Older people are less pro-market, younger people are more pro-market, but within sample, more educated are more pro-market. The same is true for men and women. Women are also more pro-market the more educated you are. The only difference is that the level of women's overall average pro-market is lower than the average men. So it's like comparing the old and the young. Okay. The women are more like the older Soviets, and the men are more like the younger Russians. In the sense that for both of them there's a positive slope, of education and pro-market culture. And then now you say, this has to be seen in the context of a broader literature, which is the baseline, is that the biggest effect is probably cognitive endowment. There's a lot of evidence that direct measures of IQ, not just education. So people are healthier and smarter or more pro-market, independent of the system of the government. However, depending upon system, there are different marginal effects. So part of what we're looking here is the marginal effect of education. And it seems to be that controlling for these other factors like cognitive ability or family income or something, education is still pro-market. It's interesting because the sociological literature says, in general, educated people tend to be more pro-liberal, both socially and economically. But the social component of liberalism is not stable with respect to education. The market component of education is stable with respect to education, independent of country, institutional system, or policies. So that is, as a rule of thumb, all over the world, with some very few exceptions, which are mostly insignificant but still same sign, more educated people are more pro-market. So what we're trying to understand is a little bit of the marginal effect.
Yeah.
In this case, the marginal effect is also positive. So education seems to have a more pro-market value added.
Can you, in that story, how would you picture Bernie Sanders effect? I mean, that you have highly educated people.
No, but now you look, I would argue that's second order. That's a second order effect. That is to sort of say, if you ask questions about market regulation and so forth, my guess is to say that the Bernie Sanders people are, on average, voters still going to be more pro-market than people with no high school degrees. Make it simple.
So the Trump pro-protective.
Yeah, you'll have both. And what you're seeing among the Bernie Sanders people is, one is that it's a second derivative issue, and then it depends how you parse it.
And considering the same level of education and the differences in ages, could this effect be related to a sort of life cycle?
Could be, but we haven't separated it out, right? So one effect could be the role of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
That's a fixed effect. The second one could be a life cycle one, but the third one could be increasing cognitive ability.
Yeah.
So as people are healthier and richer. And then again, there's an interesting question of why that's true, right? So one story could be greater health and smarts mean that people feel more confident about their lives and therefore are willing to trust the market. Or the alternative story is that if they are smarter, they understand better how anonymous markets work, and people who are less ability focus more on personal interactions, and personalized exchange is the idea of patronizing the government as family is different also.
And also if they are smarter, they know that in the market they could have a better option.
Correct, but that's it. Those are two different
Yes.
stories, and we can't understand it, separate them. But the evidence for that one you said is partially related to these economic expectations. The economic expectations is positive. That's all we can get from this.
Yeah.
Are you going to present that anywhere in near time?
In your time? No, I think no.
Okay. You want to do that?
Okay.
Present.
Give the background.
This is
context.
how you sell the paper as opposed to
Okay.
writing a paper.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Small question. What do you mean by reverse causality? That if I'm pro-market, I'm going to get more education?
Exactly.
Like if your family is,
Yes.
say, more pro-market, you become more, you will get more education.